Previously on Radio Free Innsmouth.
But there's a problem here. See, I was gonna do an episode on like a Russian black metal band. You know how many fucking jokes I could make about that?
So I guess this week we better do a Russian band. Time to do some Temnozor in honor of my buddy...
Name redacted.
Krigstrom, that was just on an episode of Diablos 88. He said that he vets people in his personable life by whether or not they like Temnozor. You know, they're probably alright to hang out with if they get down with that Temnozor shit. Which, yeah, I think that's a good way of judging character. So Temnozor, when you're talking about Temnozor, there's like 3 bands. The first one was from Moscow in the mid-90s, and they're the most obscure one. I didn't really know much about them. I always saw their name on lists. But I found a rip of their tape online the other day, and it had a swastika on it, so I figured might as well listen to it. So we got some spooky, very obvious Norwegian influence going on with that bar chord work. Definitely a lot of Thorns and Mayhem influence here. So these guys are from Moscow. Their one demo that they put out is called Sinem. It's got 2 like 8-minute long black metal songs, then like 3 little folk songs on it. And like I said, this band's super obscure, but I think they might be the oldest Temnozor, because this is from like 95. But yeah, I'm digging it. It's nothing like incredibly original, especially compared to the other Temnozors that we're going to be talking about, but good stuff. Looks like it got reissued in 2007. Might be worth picking that up. So that's the first Temnozor. Put out a demo called Sinem. So like I said, I put that on and thought,
hey, that's pretty good.
But the main Temnozor we're going to be talking about is the one from Obninsk Kaluga Oblast. I can't speak Russian, sorry. But yeah, they started in 1997 with a full-length album called Sorcery is Strengthening the Black Glory of Rus, which is a great title. And when you open up the booklet to this album, you're greeted with this lovely message.
Temnozor's music is for our racial comrades worldwide only. Every subhuman buying or distributing this record does contribute to its future annihilation in 1488.
Stop it, this is hate speech.
So yeah, these guys were big on the mid-90s white nationalism 1.0 trip, if you catch my drift. But they were also big into kind of esoteric Slavic paganism and weaving a sense of dynamics into their music with a lot of different types of riffs, a lot of usage of synthesizer in ways not normally heard in black metal. A lot of this sounds a little bit Klaus Schulze influenced. There's a lot of folk music going on here too. So when you turn on the album after you get through the spooky intro, you're greeted by this. Man, that's a thin guitar tone. Cool riff though, very interesting fanfare type shit. Getting you ramped up for some folk metal, cause I gotta warn you about this flute coming up. It's a lot of flute, because it's all done in honor of Rusalia, which is a Slavonic pagan ceremony taking place around the spring solstice, celebrating renewal and childbirth and lots of stuff like that. Now we're getting into a surprisingly major key riff for black metal. That was one of their big innovations from Temnozor, was using these kind of major key riffs. But the riff itself is very complex in terms of how many notes are in it and the way the scale loops around in it. And then watch the transition into a heavier riff here. It's really good. Some good stuff. Good gym song. So, not too much sounded like this in 1997. And then here's dynamic tension created by the drums leading into a more mournful riff that still fits the overall context of the song. It's happy and hateful at the same time. And rather than just being a gimmick, Like most folk metal bands, they have the guitar playing backing chords over an accordion doing some pop melody. In this case, the guitar and flute are woven together in a complex tapestry. Sorry, this guy's hateful vocals are fucking up my speechifying. But yeah, especially for a young band, the riff complexity on this album is off the charts. There's a lot of passion. And then we're back into that original melody right there. But yeah, first Temnozor album is really great. But then the band sort of dissolved. And then the main guy behind the band, who didn't actually play on the first album, but he wrote all the music and the lyrics, his name was Goruth, real name Ilya Babin. That's kind of a weird model in the Slavonic metal scene. Lucifugium has the same thing, where there's a guy behind the band that writes all the music and the lyrics and such, but he doesn't actually play anything. He's like an orchestrator. It's kind of a cool way to do a band, I suppose. But anyways, he brings it back in the early 2000s with the Fragments EP. Hence why if you buy Sorcery is Strengthening the Black Bud of Rus nowadays, you get something called Sorcery of Fragments, where it combines those two. And then we are on into the first album from the modern third incarnation of Temnozor, which is called Horizons. So already the production's a lot thicker. Really nice layered guitar tone there, backing up that all-important flute. Flutes and poetry, man, that's what Temnozor is all about. Take it or leave it. I listen to them at the gym a lot. They're still plenty heavy, even with all the flutes and hurdy-gurdies and such. Really good drumming on this album, too. I like that kind of calm ride cymbal sound they got. And now we're getting into the other thing Temnozor's famous for, is these rich, passionate Russian baritone vocals. Really good singing from this guy. Very passionate. You know what's goofy is Brett Stevens fucking hates Slavic black metal and folk metal for some reason, but even he admitted that Temnozor were like the best of Russian opera at what they do. They're really good. We're gonna get into a bit of a break up here after we do that sick ride cymbal beat again, of course. So a little flute counterpoint to the initial melody that we heard, riffing on it a little bit. And you can tell we're getting into some heavier territory. So, if you're into the Russian black metal scene, you might have jizzed your pants a little bit there, because that's none other than Kaldrad Branislav of the bands Branacald and Ravendark doing the harsh vocals on this album. So he's from Blazebirth Hall, which is a whole separate can of worms, really interesting Russian scene that put out some good black metal. But yeah, we get into a thrash beat there. And that's all for that sample of that song. So Horizons, an excellent album. They really upped the professionalism with that one, but I would say that their crowning opus of their career thus far has been their third album, Folk Storm of the Azure Knights. So this is the first track off the album that's also called Folk Storm of the Azure Knights. You get some Russian QT whispering to you over layers of synth and drums that gradually build in intensity and complexity. You start out with that simple synth drone, and we're about halfway through it to almost where they're going to start adding the guitars. But I wanted to play this whole song because the build-up here is really indicative of the Russian classical music influence. See, the thing about Russian classical music is it's less based on counterpoint and density in the way that German classical music is. Instead, it's all about meditation on like a singular theme. And you could see Temnozor carrying over that mode of composition into the modern era with their art. So moving right along. And now we have a male voice added to our, I guess you could call it a whisper choir. Kind of an interesting thing they're doing. But you can see he's getting harsher and harsher as the song goes on, building in volume and intensity. That guitar fade-in was sick. So that's the main thing Temnozor have going for them above almost every other black metal band or folk metal band is the compositional dynamics they bring to bear. And the passion. Listen to those vocals. It's another good warm-up song in the gym. And finally, after meditating on that singular theme for about 4 or 5 minutes, we hit a counterpoint to it. So now we've brought in a blast beat drum instead of that simple tribal thing they were doing, as we're gradually ramping up that intensity to the counterpoint where it boils over. So an interesting story about Temnozor is related in an interview with them. They were playing outside a museum in Romania, and like the museum staff all came out to watch. They weren't even metal people, but they were blown away by the beauty of their music as it speaks to the Eastern European and indeed the white man's soul. This music is like life. It has all of its shades of harshness and pleasantry. And listen to that final vocal line fade into those flutes. Temnozor really composes on a higher level than almost every other band. I know I've said that a lot, but I'm going to reiterate it because it's true. You know, sorry, no offense, but it's true. So they take a couple years off, go out touring, playing the Kolovorot festival in Ukraine a couple times, I think, getting in all sorts of fights with Antifa. In fact, these guys were calling out Antifa for being bitches like way back in the late 90s, you know? We should have listened, but eventually they come out with their 4th overall album, which is called Haunted Dreamscapes, wherein they explore some new sonic textures. So whereas Folkstorm of the Azure Knights was preoccupied with generally being a rhapsody to the pagan soul, this album, as befits the title Haunted Dreamscapes, is more of a exploration of the more horrific and dark aspects of Slavic folklore. So this song is called, well, it's literally translated Evil God's Ravens, but I'm pretty sure they're talking about Chernobog there. And you can see this one's a little bit more straightforward black metal, at least during this part, which I think threw some people off. But if you give this album time, it's actually just as great as Folkstorm of the Azure Knights is. Nasty vocals, I like it. Actually, the change between albums here is similar to what Moonsorrow did, where as they got older, instead of getting lighter, they got darker and heavier. And now we're into some more unique riffing. This weird Viking rowing chant of a guitar riff looping around to lead us into some folk instrumentation, I mean, once it concludes. God damn, I can't talk tonight, but Now we're talking. See? Folk music can be dark and weird and spooky, just like any other variant of metal can. It's not all stupid fucking Inciferum and Corpaclani drinking songs. Fuck that shit, man. This is the real shit, nigga. So yeah, Temnozor. One of those bands that was really formative on my ideology as a youngster, which according to all the interviews I've read with them was intentional. They said the original purpose of their band was to awaken white youth to their heritage and to the struggle that they're locked in. And I don't even speak Russian and it fucking worked with me, so they must be doing something right. So that was, hopefully, a quick little appraisal of Temnozor's career. Maybe it inspired you to go check out some of their stuff. If not, I don't know what the fuck to do with you. They're obviously great. I guess I'll see you next week. Actually, maybe I won't. I'll have to see if I have time to record one next week. Whatever.